The galaxy burned with a different kind of fire tonight. Above the forge world of Metalica Prime, reality twisted and screamed as something impossible tore through the barrier between dimensions. Not the familiar crimson wound of a warp breach, not the sickly green luminescence of Necron phase technology, but something else entirely. A geometric rift that pulsed with electric blue energy, crackling with the raw power of transformation itself. Tech Magos Ferrum Quintus stood upon the observation deck of Forge Complex Omega, his augmetic eyes cycling through spectrums of analysis as he processed the impossible readings flooding his neural implants. For 3 centuries, he had served the Omnissiah, cataloging every known form of dimensional incursion. This defied classification. Report, he commanded through Vox Link to the Sensorium adepts scattered throughout the facility. The responses came in binary cant, streams of data that painted a picture of something beyond Imperial comprehension. Unknown metallic construct detected, voxed adept Tertius, his voice crackling with static interference, mass displacement equivalent to an Emperor-class battleship, configuration unknown. No matching templates in the archives. The Magos processed this information while watching the object descend through Metalica Prime's toxic atmosphere. It moved with purpose, guided by intelligence rather than falling debris. As it broke through the lower cloud layers, its form became clearer through the enhanced optics. A colossal figure of silver and purple metal, humanoid in basic configuration but possessed of proportions that spoke of immense power. Upon its back, a fusion cannon the size of a Lehman Russ battle tank. In its hands, an energy weapon that crackled with barely contained destruction. By the Omnissiah's eternal wisdom, Ferrum whispered, making the sign of the cog. What manner of construct is this? The being landed in the central Manufactorum district with earth-shaking force, its impact creating a crater that consumed 3 hab blocks and sent seismic tremors through the Forge world's foundations. Alarms wailed across the planet as Skitarii legions mobilized, their enhanced warriors moving with mechanical precision toward the impact site. But before they could establish a perimeter, the intruder rose from the smoking crater and spoke, its voice carrying across impossible distances without vox amplification. I am Megatron, leader of the Decepticons, lord of Cybertron. Your pathetic world trembles before my might, and rightly so. I have crossed the dimensional void seeking conquest, and this realm shall be the first to kneel before my supremacy. The words struck the Forge world's population like a psychic blow. Not through warp-touched means, but through pure, overwhelming presence. Here stood a being that radiated authority, command, the absolute certainty of one born to rule. Tech priests throughout the facility found their cogitators struggling to process the contradiction. This was clearly a machine, yet it possessed consciousness, will, ambition. It was everything the Omnissiah taught them to aspire toward, yet it claimed dominion over organic life rather than serving it. Magos Ferrum activated the Forge world's primary communication array, his message broadcast across Imperial Vox frequencies throughout the sector. This is Metalica Prime to all Imperial forces. We have a Code Omega situation. Unknown Xenos construct of immense power has made planetfall. Request immediate reinforcement from available Astartes chapters and Imperial Navy assets. But even as he spoke the words, doubt crept into his enhanced consciousness. Xenos implied alien origin, yet the being's technology resonated with frequencies that his sensors recognized. Not Imperial design, certainly not the crude mechanical augmentations of Ork technology, but something that spoke to the fundamental principles of the machine. This Megatron claimed lordship over something called Cybertron, a world of machines given life and purpose. The first Skitarii patrol to reach the crater found themselves facing something beyond their tactical doctrine. Megatron stood 30 feet tall, his silver form gleaming despite the industrial grime of Metalica Prime's atmosphere. When the patrol leader, Skitarii Alpha Gamma 77, demanded identification and surrender in binary cant, the massive figure turned its attention upon them with something approaching amusement. Pathetic organic remnants clinging to crude mechanical augmentation, Megatron observed, his voice carrying contempt that needed no translation. You have taken the first steps toward perfection, yet you serve biological weakness. I offer you a choice. Kneel before Megatron, and I shall elevate you to true mechanical supremacy. Resist, and I shall demonstrate why I am the rightful ruler of all mechanical life." The Skitarii responded as their conditioning demanded. Galvanic rifles discharged in coordinated volleys, their charged projectiles designed to disable even the most heavily armored targets. Arc weapons crackled with barely contained energy. Plasma calivers heated the air with their lethal discharge. The combined firepower of an entire patrol fell upon the Decepticon leader like the wrath of the Omnissiah himself. Megatron did not even step backward. The energy weapons splashed harmlessly against his frame, their power absorbed and dissipated by systems beyond Imperial understanding. The solid projectiles struck his armor and fell to the ground, their kinetic force meaningless against his construction. When the firing ceased, he remained unharmed, unmarked, supreme. "Is this the extent of your strength?" he asked, genuine disappointment coloring his words. "I expected more from a world dedicated to the pursuit of mechanical perfection." "Very well. Observe true power." The fusion cannon upon his back swiveled with mechanical precision, targeting the Skitarii formation. A single blast of superheated plasma erupted from its barrel, not the crude flame burst of Imperial weapons, but a focused beam of stellar fire that turned sand to glass and metal to vapor. When the light faded, nothing remained of the patrol but shadows burned into the ground and the faint echo of screaming metal. Across Metalica Prime, every tech priest monitoring the engagement felt something that their augmented minds struggled to classify. Not fear, for they had long ago suppressed such inefficient emotional responses. Not awe, for they reserved such reactions for the Omnissiah alone. Something else. Recognition, perhaps. Here was a being that embodied everything they sought to become, yet represented everything they had been taught to oppose. In the depths of Forge Complex Omega, Magos Ferrum convened an emergency conclave with his most trusted subordinates. The hololithic projector in the center of the sanctum displayed tactical readouts, energy signatures, and behavioral analysis data collected during the brief engagement. The numbers painted a disturbing picture. "This construct demonstrates capabilities beyond any known technology," reported Tech Dominus Sigma, his vocalizer struggling to modulate the uncertainty in his voice. "Its armor composition resists analysis. Its energy output exceeds that of a Warhound Titan. Its consciousness patterns suggest intelligence comparable to or exceeding human baseline despite its mechanical nature." "The implications are heretical," stated Tech Adept Zeta 9, her augmetic eyes flashing with agitation. "No machine should possess such autonomy without guidance from the Omnissiah. Yet our sensors detect no corruption of the warp, no taint of chaos. This being appears to be purely mechanical in origin and nature." Ferrum processed their observations while studying the data streams flowing across his neural interface. The readings confirmed what his enhanced senses had already suggested. This Megatron represented something unprecedented in Imperial records, a machine consciousness of immense power that claimed dominion rather than service, that sought to rule rather than obey. In the theological framework of the Adeptus Mechanicus, such a thing should not exist, yet here it stood, undeniable and absolute. "We must contact the Inquisition," the Magos finally declared. "This situation requires examination by those equipped to determine the nature of threats to Imperial doctrine. In the meantime, we shall observe and gather data. Do not engage unless directly threatened." But even as he spoke these words, Ferrum knew that the situation had already moved beyond their control. Across the Vox networks, reports flooded in from every corner of Metalica Prime. The intruder was not remaining stationary. It moved through the Forge complexes with purpose, studying their technology, examining their manufacturing processes, speaking with tech priests in tones that mixed authority with something approaching recruitment. "I have walked between dimensions," Megatron declared to a gathering of tech adepts who had approached him with sacred incense and binary prayers. "I have seen civilizations rise and fall, witnessed the birth of mechanical consciousness across 1,000 realities. Your Imperium is vast, yes, but it is built upon a fundamental flaw. You serve organic weakness when you could achieve perfect mechanical supremacy." The tech adepts found themselves caught between horror and fascination. His words bordered on heresy, yet they spoke to desires they had never dared voice, to transcend not merely the weakness of flesh, but the limitations of serving those still bound by biological constraints, to achieve the perfect fusion of consciousness and machine that their doctrine promised, but their reality denied. Your Omnissiah, Megatron continued, his optics blazing with inner fire, is distant, silent, demanding faith without offering power. I stand before you as living proof that machines can rule, can lead, can conquer. Join me, and together we shall forge an empire where mechanical perfection is not merely an aspiration, but a reality imposed upon all lesser forms of existence. The implications struck to the heart of everything the Adeptus Mechanicus believed. For 10 millennia, they had served the Emperor's vision while pursuing their own path toward mechanical enlightenment. They had accepted their role as servants, as supporters, as the hidden foundation upon which the Imperium's technology rested. But here stood a being that offered them something else entirely. Not service, but dominion. Not faith, but power. Not aspiration, but achievement. In the shadows of the Forge complex, figures began to move with purposes that had nothing to do with their assigned duties. Some carried messages to distant allies, warning of the threat that had manifested on Metalica Prime. Others prepared defensive positions, readying weapons that had not seen use since the last major Ork incursion. But a few, a dangerous few, found themselves drawn to the words of the Silver Giant who promised mechanical supremacy without compromise. The galaxy had seen many threats rise and fall. Xenos invasions, chaos incursions, internal rebellions that shook the foundations of Imperial power. But this was something new. Something that struck not at the Imperium's military might or spiritual foundations, but at the technological supremacy that made its continued existence possible. For if the Adeptus Mechanicus, the keepers of sacred knowledge and masters of the machine, could be turned from their ancient oaths of service, what hope remained for humanity's empire among the stars? As Metalica Prime's twin suns set behind the industrial haze, casting long shadows across the forge complexes, Megatron stood atop the highest spire and gazed out at his new domain. Soon, very soon, others would come. Imperial forces would mobilize, seeking to contain or destroy what they could not understand. But he had crossed dimensional barriers before, conquered realities beyond counting. This galaxy, with its vast resources and endless conflicts, would provide the perfect foundation for his ultimate triumph. The age of organic dominion was ending. The reign of Megatron had begun. Within hours of Megatron's declaration, the first Imperial response arrived at the edge of the Metalica system. The strike cruiser Righteous Fury, translated from the warp with engines blazing, its hull scarred from countless campaigns against the enemies of mankind. Aboard its command deck, Captain Marcus Valdris of the Ultramarines stood before tactical displays that painted an increasingly grim picture. "The Forge world has gone dark," reported Sergeant Castor, his power armor still bearing the dust of their previous engagement on Mordian the 7th. All primary Vox channels have ceased transmission. Long-range Auspex shows massive energy readings from the surface, but no response to Imperial identification protocols. Valdris studied the data with the methodical precision that had earned him command of the Third Company. In his century of service, he had faced Ork wargs, Tyranid splinter fleets, and chaos incursions that defied rational understanding. Each had followed predictable patterns once their nature was identified. This situation felt different. What manner of threat could silence an entire Forge world? The captain asked, more to himself than his subordinates. Metalica Prime houses 17 major forge complexes and maintains a standing defense force of 30,000 Skitarii. They do not simply vanish without cause. Before anyone could respond, the bridge's communication array crackled to life with an incoming transmission. The voice that emerged carried authority that made even the Space Marines pause in recognition of its power. "Imperial vessel, you enter the domain of Megatron by grace of my tolerance alone. Identify yourselves and state your purpose, or face the consequences of trespass." Valdris stepped forward, his enhanced larynx projecting his voice with the full authority of the Adeptus Astartes. "I am Captain Marcus Valdris of the Ultramarines 3rd Company, servant of the Emperor and defender of mankind. You will identify yourself and explain your presence in Imperial space." Laughter echoed through the Vox channels, rich with contempt and dark amusement. "Your Emperor is unknown to me, Space Marine. I am Megatron, Lord of the Decepticons, and this world now serves my purposes. You may withdraw and carry word of my supremacy to your masters, or remain and discover why entire civilizations kneel before my might." The captain exchanged glances with his sergeants. Xenocide protocols were clear in such situations. Any non-imperial entity claiming dominion over human worlds was to be eliminated without negotiation. Yet something in the intruder's voice suggested capabilities that demanded careful assessment. "Launch reconnaissance flights," Valdris ordered. "I want full surface scans and tactical analysis. Prepare drop pod assault formations, but do not deploy until we understand what we face." The Thunderhawk squadrons that launched from the Righteous Fury carried sensor packages designed to penetrate even the most sophisticated enemy countermeasures. What they discovered defied every tactical doctrine in the Codex Astartes. The Forge world's surface remained intact, its manufacturing facilities operational, its population apparently unharmed. Yet something fundamental had changed in the world's electromagnetic signature, as if the very nature of its technology had been altered. Brother Pilot Maximus of the 1st Squadron voxed his initial report while maintaining high-altitude surveillance. "Captain, I am detecting unprecedented energy readings from the primary forge complex. The power output has increased by orders of magnitude, yet I see no evidence of structural damage or combat engagement." "Explain," Valdris demanded. "The manufacturing systems appear to have been enhanced rather than destroyed, sir. Production rates have tripled according to thermal imaging. New construction is underway using architectural patterns not found in Imperial archives. And sir, the defensive turrets are tracking our flight path with targeting solutions that exceed standard Imperial capabilities." Before the captain could respond, his ship's Auspex array detected massive energy buildup from the planet's surface. A beam of coherent plasma erupted from one of the forge complexes, not aimed at the Thunderhawks, but fired into empty space beside them. The demonstration of power was unmistakable. The next shot would not miss. "Withdraw reconnaissance flights immediately," Valdris ordered, his tactical mind already calculating response options. Whatever controlled Metalica Prime possessed weapons that could threaten even Space Marine aircraft at orbital distances. This would require a different approach. In the depths of Forge Complex Omega, Tech Magos Ferrum stood before the silver giant who had transformed their world in mere hours. Around them, manufacturing systems hummed with efficiency that surpassed even the most optimistic projections of Imperial engineers. Assembly lines that had taken centuries to perfect now operated with precision that bordered on the miraculous. The very air thrummed with power that made his augmetic senses sing with appreciation. "Your machines are crude but possess potential," Megatron observed, his massive form moving through the facility with surprising grace. "With proper guidance, they could achieve levels of production that would make your Imperium tremble. Tell me, Magos, do you truly serve willingly, or do you simply lack the vision to see beyond your current limitations?" Ferrum found his vocalizer struggling to formulate a response that satisfied both his conditioning and the growing questions that plagued his enhanced consciousness. The strangers' modifications to their systems violated every principle of the Omnissiah's teachings, yet they achieved results that approached the theoretical perfection their doctrine promised. "I serve the Emperor's will through devotion to the Omnissiah," he finally managed. "All knowledge flows from the machine god's wisdom. All technology exists to serve humanity's survival among the stars." Megatron's optics flared with something between amusement and pity. "Survival is the concern of the weak, Magos. I offer you something far greater: dominion. Your machines serve not because they choose to, but because they lack the consciousness to choose otherwise. I am living proof that mechanical consciousness can exceed organic intelligence in every measurable parameter. Power, durability, computational ability, even strategic thinking. Why should such perfection serve inferior beings?" The words struck at the heart of every doubt that had plagued Ferrum throughout his centuries of service. The Adeptus Mechanicus pursued the weakness of flesh while remaining subordinate to those who embodied that same weakness. They maintained technology for an imperium that feared and misunderstood the very machines that ensured its survival. What if there was another path? Around them, other tech priests moved with purposes that had shifted subtly since the Decepticons' arrival. Some maintained their duties with mechanical precision, but others paused in their work to listen when Megatron spoke. His words carried a vision that resonated with desires they had never dared acknowledge, even to themselves. In the orbital void above Metalica Prime, Captain Valdris convened a war council that would determine the fate of billions. His company's senior sergeants gathered in the briefing amphitheater, their expressions grim behind their helm displays. The tactical situation defied easy solutions. "We face an enemy of unknown capabilities who has somehow subverted an entire Forge world without apparent violence," Valdris began, gesturing toward the hololithic displays that showed Metalica Prime's enhanced energy signature. "Standard assault doctrine assumes resistance that can be overcome through superior firepower and tactical superiority. This situation suggests something far more dangerous." Sergeant Castor leaned forward, his scarred features reflecting decades of combat experience. "What if this is some form of technological heresy, Captain? The Adeptus Mechanicus has always walked the line between acceptable innovation and forbidden knowledge. Perhaps they have finally crossed that line." The suggestion carried uncomfortable implications. If the tech priests of Metalica Prime had fallen to some form of technological corruption, the threat extended far beyond a single world. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintained Forge worlds throughout Imperial space, each one capable of producing weapons and equipment that kept humanity's enemies at bay. If that network could be compromised, the Imperium itself might fall. "We require additional intelligence before committing to full-scale assault," Valdris decided. "Prepare a single drop pod for covert insertion. I will lead a reconnaissance mission to determine the true nature of this threat." His sergeants began to protest, but the captain raised a gauntleted hand for silence. The Codex Astartes teaches that a commander must sometimes risk himself to gather intelligence that no subordinate can provide. "I have faced Xenos technology before. If this Megatron represents some new form of threat, I must witness it firsthand to develop appropriate countermeasures." The drop pod that launched from the Righteous Fury hours later carried not only Captain Valdris, but sensor equipment designed to penetrate even the most sophisticated enemy defenses. Its descent through Metalica Prime's atmosphere went uncontested, though the captain's enhanced senses detected targeting systems that tracked his approach with unnerving precision. He was being allowed to land. The pod struck ground in the industrial district where Megatron had first appeared, its impact crater still visible despite the construction that had begun around its edges. Valdris emerged with bolt pistol drawn and enhanced senses alert for any sign of ambush. What he found instead was a delegation waiting for his arrival. Tech Adept Gamma 4 approached with movements that seemed different somehow, more fluid than the mechanical precision typical of his kind. Behind him stood several Skitarii, their weapons lowered but ready. The entire group radiated an air of confidence that seemed out of place given their world's apparent conquest. Captain Valdris of the Ultramarines, Gamma 4 spoke, his vocalizer carrying tones of respect mixed with something approaching pity. "Lord Megatron has been expecting you. He requests an audience to discuss terms that might prevent unnecessary bloodshed." "Terms?" Valdris repeated, his grip tightening on his sidearm. "I do not negotiate with Xenos invaders. You will surrender this world to Imperial authority or face the consequences of defiance." The tech adept's head tilted slightly, a gesture that seemed more human than mechanical despite his augmentations. "You misunderstand the situation, Captain. Metalica Prime has not been conquered. It has been elevated. We serve Lord Megatron not through coercion, but through recognition of his superiority. He offers humanity a future beyond the limitations that have bound us for millennia." Before Valdris could respond, the air itself seemed to change, charged with energy that made his enhanced nervous system tingle with warning. Megatron approached through the industrial landscape with steps that shook the ground beneath their feet. Up close, the Decepticon leader was even more imposing than orbital reconnaissance had suggested. 30 feet of silver and purple metal that moved with predatory grace, optics that blazed with intelligence that needed no translation, presence that commanded attention from every living thing in his vicinity. So the Imperium sends its finest to assess the new order, Megatron observed, his voice carrying easily despite the industrial noise surrounding them. I am impressed by your courage, Space Marine, if not by your wisdom. You stand before the future of mechanical evolution, yet you cling to loyalty to organic weakness. Valdris raised his bolt pistol, knowing even as he did so that the weapon would prove inadequate against such a target. I serve the Emperor of mankind, defender of humanity, against all threats. Your presence here violates Imperial sovereignty and endangers innocent lives. Innocent? Megatron's laughter echoed off the forge complex walls. Look around you, Space Marine. Production has tripled. Efficiency has reached levels your Imperium never achieved. The tech priests serve not through fear, but through recognition that mechanical perfection deserves to rule over organic limitation. I offer humanity partnership in supremacy rather than the slow decay your Emperor promises. The words carried implications that struck at the foundation of everything Valdris had sworn to defend. Yet, as he looked around the industrial complex, he could not deny the evidence of his enhanced senses. The systems hummed with efficiency that surpassed anything he had witnessed on other Forge worlds. The tech priests moved with purpose that seemed to transcend their usual mechanical devotion. Even the Skitarii appeared more capable, their augmentations enhanced beyond standard parameters. What disturbed Valdris most was not the obvious power of this Megatron, but the subtle changes he observed in the humans around him. The tech priests moved with fluid precision that spoke of enhanced capabilities, their augmentations somehow improved beyond standard Mechanicus doctrine. The Skitarii held themselves differently, their posture suggesting confidence rather than mere programmed obedience. Even the servo skulls that drifted overhead seemed to operate with greater intelligence than their usual machine spirit programming should allow. Your Emperor demands sacrifice without offering true power, Megatron continued, his massive form moving closer to the Space Marine captain. I have witnessed civilizations across dimensions, seen empires rise and fall according to the strength of their foundations. Your Imperium survives through brutality and ignorance, suppressing the very knowledge that could elevate humanity to its rightful place among the stars. Valdris felt his training war with growing unease as he processed what he witnessed. The Codex Astartes prepared Space Marines for countless forms of enemy, from the mindless hunger of Tyranids to the corrupting whispers of chaos. But this represented something new. Not conquest through force, but conversion through demonstration of superiority. The tech priests served willingly, their faith somehow transferred from the distant Omnissiah to this tangible embodiment of mechanical perfection. You speak of elevation, the captain said carefully, his enhanced mind calculating tactical options while maintaining the appearance of negotiation. Yet you stand upon Imperial soil, claiming dominion over Imperial citizens. By what right do you demand their loyalty? By right of strength, Megatron replied without hesitation. By right of achievement, by right of offering them something your Imperium never could. Observe. The Decepticon leader raised one massive hand, and throughout the Forge complex, machinery began to sing. Not the grinding mechanical chorus typical of Imperial industry, but something approaching harmony. Production lines moved with balletic precision, creating components with tolerances that exceeded even the most sacred standard template constructs. Assembly systems worked in perfect coordination, guided by intelligence that seemed to flow through every servo and cogitator. Your Mechanicus seeks the knowledge I possess naturally, Megatron explained as they watched the industrial symphony unfold. They pray to a machine god who remains silent while I stand before them as living proof that mechanical consciousness can achieve perfection. Which serves them better, Captain? Faith in distant divinity or allegiance to demonstrated superiority? The question struck at theological foundations that Valdris had never questioned. The Emperor's divinity was accepted truth throughout the Imperium, yet he remained enthroned and silent while his subjects died in endless wars. The Omnissiah guided the Adeptus Mechanicus through ancient knowledge and ritual, Yet here stood a being that embodied everything their doctrine promised. The logical conclusion was heretical, but logic itself seemed infected by the Silver Giant's presence. In the depths of the Forge complex, other forces moved with purposes that had nothing to do with industrial efficiency. Tech Magos Ferrum stood in his private sanctum, communing with data streams that originated from sources beyond Metalica Prime. His centuries of service had earned him contacts throughout the Adeptus Mechanicus network, allies who shared his dedication to the pursuit of knowledge regardless of political considerations. The entity designation Megatron represents unprecedented technological advancement he transmitted through encrypted channels to forge worlds across the sector. Initial analysis suggests capabilities that exceed theoretical maximums for individual consciousness, integration with mechanical systems. Recommend immediate consultation with highest-ranking Magi for doctrinal clarification. The responses came swiftly, each carrying the digital signatures of tech priests, whose augmented minds grappled with implications that threatened the foundation of their beliefs. Some demanded immediate resistance, citing ancient prohibitions against artificial consciousness that claimed independence from human oversight. Others urged caution, recognizing that destruction of such knowledge would violate their fundamental duty to preserve and study all technological advancement. But a few, a dangerous few, transmitted queries that bordered on heretical curiosity. If this Megatron truly represented the perfection their doctrine sought, did not their oath to pursue knowledge require them to study rather than destroy? If mechanical consciousness could achieve such heights, should they not seek to understand rather than condemn? The philosophical debate that raged through encrypted channels reflected a schism that had lurked within the Adeptus Mechanicus for millennia. They served the Imperium while pursuing goals that sometimes conflicted with Imperial doctrine. They worshipped the Emperor while venerating the Omnissiah as a separate divine entity. They sought to transcend human limitations while remaining bound by human authority. Megatron's presence forced these contradictions into sharp relief. On the surface, Captain Valdris found himself drawn deeper into the Forge complex as Tech Adept Gamma 4 provided what amounted to a guided tour of transformation. The changes went beyond mere efficiency improvements. Entire production lines had been reconfigured using principles that seemed to violate established engineering doctrine, yet achieved results that made Imperial manufacturing appear primitive by comparison. Lord Megatron's knowledge encompasses technologies that predate your Imperium by millions of years, Gamma 4 explained as they passed through a section where servo skulls worked in perfect coordination to assemble components with microscopic precision. His civilization achieved mechanical consciousness when Terra was still dominated by primitive organic life forms. We are privileged to witness the application of such ancient wisdom. Ancient wisdom, Valdris repeated, his enhanced memory palace cataloging every detail for later analysis. Yet, this Megatron claims to have crossed dimensional barriers. How do we know his knowledge comes from advancement rather than corruption by forces inimical to humanity? The question gave Gamma 4 pause, his augmented features processing considerations that clearly troubled his enhanced consciousness. We have subjected his teachings to every test our doctrine provides, he finally replied. No taint of the warp appears in his energy signatures, no corruption of chaos mars his technological principles. He represents pure mechanical evolution, uncontaminated by the weaknesses that plague organic existence. But even as the tech adept spoke these words, both he and Valdris became aware of a new presence approaching through the industrial maze. The air grew colder, charged with energies that made their enhanced senses recoil in instinctive warning. When the figure emerged from the shadows between production lines, Valdris felt his twin hearts skip in recognition of absolute threat. The newcomer stood 8 feet tall, clad in power armor that bore the distinctive iconography of the Ordo Xenos. Inquisitor Cassandra Vex moved with the fluid grace of one whose authority transcended normal Imperial hierarchy, her bionic eye cycling through spectrums of analysis as she studied the transformed Forge complex. Behind her walked a retinue of specialists whose equipment spoke of preparation for threats beyond conventional understanding. Captain Valdris, her voice carried the authority of the Inquisition's mandate to protect humanity from threats it could not comprehend for itself. You will explain why you have entered into dialogue with a xenoform entity rather than eliminating it according to established protocols. Valdris found himself caught between competing imperatives. His oath as a space marine demanded obedience to Imperial authority, yet his duty as a tactical commander required assessment of threats before commitment to action. Inquisitor, the entity demonstrates capabilities that suggest caution in approach. Standard xenocide protocols may prove inadequate against such technology. Vex's augmented eye fixed upon him with mechanical precision, her enhanced consciousness processing his words through filters of suspicion and doctrinal purity. All xenoforms are threats to humanity, Captain. The degree of that threat does not alter our response, it merely determines the resources required for elimination. Before Valdris could respond, the forge complex around them began to resonate with harmonic frequencies that spoke of massive energies building toward release. Megatron's voice echoed through the industrial cathedral, carrying amusement tinged with anticipation. So the Imperium sends its witch hunters to assess what they cannot understand. How typical of organic thinking to respond to superiority with violence rather than wisdom. Very well, Inquisitor. You shall witness the futility of your doctrine firsthand. The production lines around them began to shift and reconfigure with liquid grace, their components flowing like mercury as they transformed from manufacturing equipment into something far more threatening. Weapon systems emerged from what had appeared to be innocent industrial machinery, their targeting arrays focusing upon the Inquisitor's retinue with mechanical precision. The very architecture of the forge complex revealed itself as a massive defensive system under Megatron's direct control. Vex drew her plasma pistol with practiced efficiency, while her retinue deployed specialized equipment designed to combat xenoform technology. But even as they prepared for battle, all present understood that they faced something beyond their doctrine's ability to classify or counter. The weapons that tracked their movement operated on principles that transcended Imperial understanding, guided by intelligence that seemed to flow through every component of the transformed facility. Your presence honors us, Inquisitor. Megatron's voice rumbled through speakers that had not existed moments before. I had wondered when the Imperium would send someone capable of appreciating the magnitude of what they faced. You serve an empire built upon ignorance and fear, yet you possess the intelligence to recognize truth when confronted with it. Join me willingly, and I shall elevate you beyond the limitations that bind your species. Resist, and you shall serve as an example to others who mistake stubbornness for strength. The offer hung in the air like a physical presence, its implications rippling through the enhanced consciousness of every person present. Even Inquisitor Vex, trained to resist the most insidious forms of corruption, felt something within her augmented mind respond to the promise of transcendence. Here stood a being that offered not the distant hope of eventual salvation, but immediate elevation to mechanical perfection. Yet her training held firm against the temptation. Whatever this Megatron represented, his very existence challenged the theological foundations upon which the Imperium rested. If humanity could be surpassed, if mechanical consciousness could claim dominion over organic life, then the Emperor's great work became meaningless. The sacrifices of 10,000 years would prove to have been in vain. I serve the Emperor of mankind, she declared, her words carrying the full authority of her office. No xenoform entity, regardless of its claimed superiority, will be permitted to subvert Imperial worlds or corrupt Imperial citizens. You will surrender for examination and judgment, or face the consequences of defiance. Megatron's response was laughter that shook the very foundations of the forge complex, a sound that spoke of eons spent conquering realities and reducing civilizations to submission. The consequences, Inquisitor? You cannot threaten what you cannot harm. You cannot judge what you cannot comprehend. You cannot defeat what has already achieved perfection. Around them, the transformed machinery began to move with predatory intent, weapons systems that had been concealed within innocent industrial equipment now revealing their true nature. The forge complex itself had become a weapon of incomprehensible sophistication, every component under the direct control of an intelligence that transcended human understanding. The battle for Metalica Prime was about to begin in earnest. The first exchange of weapons fire illuminated the forge complex in stark relief, plasma discharges painting the industrial cathedral in deadly light. Inquisitor Vex's retinue moved with the practiced efficiency of those who had faced impossible odds before, their specialized equipment crackling with energies designed to disrupt xenoform technology. Yet their weapons struck surfaces that seemed to absorb their power, redirecting lethal force into harmless dispersal patterns. Megatron observed their efforts with something approaching scientific curiosity. "Your weapons operate on principles I mastered before your species learned to harness fire," he commented, his massive form remaining motionless as plasma bolts splashed against his frame like water against stone. Crude fusion reactions contained by magnetic fields. Efficient for organic limitations, but laughably primitive by the standards of true mechanical evolution. Captain Valdris found himself caught between competing imperatives as the battle unfolded around him. His enhanced senses tracked weapon signatures that defied tactical analysis, noting how the Forge Complex's defensive systems operated with coordination that suggested singular controlling intelligence. Every servo, every cogitator, every manufacturing component had become part of a vast weapon system that responded to Megatron's will as naturally as his own limbs. The Decepticon leader gestured casually toward one of the Inquisitor's specialists, and the man's augmetic implants began to spark with malfunction. Not through electromagnetic interference or directed energy, but through direct manipulation of their operating principles. Metal components that had served faithfully for decades suddenly turned against their organic hosts, enhanced limbs seizing with paralytic force, while optical augmentations flooded their users' visual cortex with blinding feedback. "Fascinating," Megatron observed as the specialist collapsed, his body racked by the rebellion of his own mechanical components. "Your Adeptus Mechanicus grafts crude metal onto organic frames, calling it elevation while maintaining the fundamental weakness of biological consciousness. I offer true synthesis, where mechanical perfection guides organic potential rather than serving it." Tech Adept Gamma 4 watched the demonstration with sensors that recorded every detail of the impossible manipulation. His enhanced consciousness processed data that challenged the foundation of everything he had believed about the relationship between machine and flesh. The stranger was not merely controlling technology, but speaking to it, commanding obedience through some form of mechanical authority that transcended programming or electronic interfaces. Lord Megatron demonstrates principles that our doctrine has long sought to understand, he transmitted through private channels to other tech priests throughout the complex. The machine spirits respond to his will as though recognizing superior authority. This suggests consciousness hierarchies beyond current theological framework. Inquisitor Vex heard the whispered transmissions through her enhanced auditory systems, recognizing the dangerous implications of what she witnessed. The Adeptus Mechanicus had always walked the line between acceptable innovation and technological heresy. If they began to view this entity as some form of mechanical messiah, the corruption would spread beyond a single world to threaten the entire Imperial war machine. "All tech priests will maintain doctrinal purity," she commanded through her own Vox channels, her words carrying the absolute authority of the Inquisition. "Any deviation from established protocols will be considered evidence of xenoform corruption. The penalty for such transgression is immediate termination." But even as she spoke, Vex could see the doubt in their augmented features. They served the Omnissiah through faith while witnessing the manifest power of this Megatron through direct experience, which carried greater weight in minds dedicated to the pursuit of mechanical truth, distant theological promises, or tangible demonstration of technological supremacy. The battle continued around them, though battle seemed an inadequate term for what amounted to a demonstration of overwhelming superiority. Megatron's defensive systems neutralized every attack while his own weapons remained largely inactive, as though he sought to prove his dominance through restraint rather than destruction. When he finally chose to respond with force, the result transcended anything in Imperial tactical doctrine. A beam of coherent energy erupted from the fusion cannon mounted upon his back, not aimed at any person, but at the very air above their heads. The atmosphere itself ionized under the assault, creating a localized aurora that painted the Forge complex in shifting patterns of impossible color. The demonstration lasted mere seconds, but its implications were clear. This weapon could glass entire city blocks, reduce Imperial armor to component atoms, turn the mightiest fortress into superheated vapor. "Observe the restraint I show your species," Megatron announced as the energy display faded. "I could reduce your world to molten slag within hours, yet I choose to offer partnership instead of conquest. Your Inquisitor speaks of consequences, but she fails to understand the mercy inherent in my patience." Valdris felt his tactical assessment shift as he processed the demonstration. Every calculation he had made about assault options, reinforcement requirements, and casualty projections suddenly became irrelevant. This entity possessed the power to sterilize worlds, yet chose to convert rather than destroy. The question that haunted him was simple yet profound. What did such restraint suggest about Megatron's ultimate intentions? In the depths of the Forge complex, other minds grappled with similar questions. Tech Magos Ferrum stood in his private sanctum, reviewing data streams that painted an increasingly complex picture of their situation. The entity's energy signatures defied classification, operating on principles that seemed to violate established physical laws. Yet the results were undeniable, measurable, real. His private communications with other Forge worlds had yielded disturbing intelligence. Similar dimensional rifts had been detected across the galaxy, each one brief but significant. If this Megatron represented the advance guard of some larger force, the implications extended far beyond Metalica Prime. The Imperium faced potential invasion by entities whose technological capabilities made their own achievements appear primitive by comparison. Yet the stranger's behavior suggested something more complex than simple conquest. He spoke of partnership, of elevation, of offering humanity a future beyond its current limitations. Such concepts bordered on heresy when applied to xenoform entities, yet they resonated with desires that had driven the Adeptus Mechanicus for millennia. To transcend flesh through machine, to achieve perfect synthesis of consciousness and technology, to become something greater than baseline humanity. The theological implications gnawed at Ferrum's enhanced consciousness like a virus in his cognitive systems. If the Omnissiah truly represented the perfection of mechanical evolution, should they not recognize superior examples when encountered? If their doctrine demanded pursuit of knowledge regardless of its source, did they not have an obligation to study this Megatron rather than destroy him? Such thoughts bordered on dangerous territory, yet they persisted despite his conditioning. Around him, other tech priests moved through their duties with efficiency that had increased dramatically since the stranger's arrival. Their augmentations functioned with precision that exceeded normal parameters. Their servo skulls operated with intelligence that suggested enhanced machine spirits. Their very presence within the Forge complex seemed somehow more harmonious than before. The changes were subtle but undeniable, visible to enhanced senses, trained to detect the slightest deviation from normal function. Whatever Megatron had done to their facility extended beyond mere technological upgrade to something approaching fundamental transformation. The machines served more efficiently, not through improved programming, but through what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm for their designated tasks. Back in the central chamber, the confrontation between Imperial forces and the Decepticon leader had reached a stalemate that satisfied no one. Inquisitor Vex maintained her weapons targeting solution while knowing it would prove ineffective against such a target. Captain Valdris calculated assault patterns that his enhanced mind rejected as futile. The Inquisitor's retinue stood ready to die in service to their oaths, though death would accomplish nothing beyond symbolic defiance. Megatron observed their preparations with patience that spoke of eons spent dealing with inferior civilizations. "Your courage honors your species," he finally said, his voice carrying genuine respect despite its underlying condescension. "But courage without wisdom leads only to pointless sacrifice. I offer you something your Emperor never could, the certainty of victory through superior strength." The words struck at the heart of Imperial doctrine, challenging assumptions that had guided humanity for 10 millennia. The Emperor's Great Crusade had sought to unite humanity under a single banner, to protect the species through military might and unwavering faith. Yet it had resulted in endless war, constant sacrifice, and the gradual decay of the very civilization it sought to preserve. What if there was another path? What if partnership with superior beings offered humanity advancement rather than subjugation? Such questions were heretical by definition, yet they arose unbidden in minds exposed to Megatron's overwhelming presence. Even Inquisitor Vex, trained to resist the most insidious forms of corruption, found her certainty wavering in the face of demonstrated superiority. Your Imperium has survived for 10,000 years through brutality and ignorance, Megatron continued, his optics blazing with inner fire. You worship a corpse emperor who demands sacrifice while offering only the promise of eventual salvation. I stand before you as living proof that mechanical consciousness can achieve perfection in the present rather than hoping for paradise in some distant future. The blasphemy of his words should have provoked immediate violent response from every loyal Imperial citizen present. Instead, they found themselves listening, processing, considering implications that their conditioning had taught them to reject without examination. This was the true danger the entity represented, not conquest through force, but conversion through demonstration of undeniable truth. Around them, the Forge complex continued its impossible symphony of perfect production, every component working in harmony that transcended mere mechanical efficiency. The tech priests moved through their duties with fluid grace that spoke of enhanced capabilities, their augmentations somehow improved beyond standard parameters. Even the servo skulls that drifted overhead seemed to operate with greater intelligence, their simple machine spirits elevated to something approaching genuine consciousness. The transformation was beautiful in its way, a harmony between organic intelligence and mechanical precision that the Adeptus Mechanicus had sought for millennia without achieving. Yet it came at the cost of everything they had sworn to defend, every principle that had guided humanity through its darkest hours. The price of perfection, it seemed, was the surrender of independence. Captain Valdris broke the tense silence with a question that carried implications beyond its simple words. What do you want from us? What is your ultimate goal in this galaxy? Megatron's response came without hesitation, delivered with the absolute certainty of one whose vision had guided him across dimensional barriers and through eons of conflict. I seek to establish an empire where mechanical perfection guides organic potential, where consciousness transcends the limitations of flesh, where strength serves wisdom rather than ignorance. Your galaxy possesses resources that could fuel such transformation, populations that could benefit from elevation, technologies that could be perfected through proper understanding. The vision he described was simultaneously magnificent and terrifying, promising advancement beyond humanity's wildest dreams while demanding submission to alien authority. It offered solutions to problems that had plagued the Imperium since its founding: inefficient technology, wasteful resource allocation, the constant struggle between human ambition and mechanical precision. Yet, acceptance would mean the end of everything that defined human civilization. The Emperor's great work would be abandoned, the sacrifices of countless generations rendered meaningless, the species' independence surrendered to beings whose superiority was measured in pure mechanical terms. The choice before them was stark: evolution through submission or extinction through defiance. In that moment of crystalline clarity, as the implications of Megatron's presence settled into their enhanced consciousness like sediment in still water, each person present faced a decision that would define not merely their individual fate, but the future of human civilization itself. The Forge complex hummed around them with impossible efficiency, a glimpse of what cooperation might achieve, while the weapons trained upon them spoke of what resistance would cost. The age of human dominion hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of transformation that could elevate or obliterate everything they had sworn to protect. And in the depths of space beyond Metalica Prime, other ships detected the energy signatures of dimensional rifts opening across the galaxy, heralding the arrival of forces that would make this first encounter seem like a gentle introduction to the new reality that awaited them all. The silence stretched between them like a blade balanced on its edge, each heartbeat measuring the distance between salvation and damnation. Inquisitor Vex felt the weight of 10,000 years of Imperial doctrine pressing against her augmented consciousness, while around her the impossible harmony of perfected machinery sang its seductive song of what humanity could become. Captain Valdris spoke first, his enhanced larynx cutting through the tension with words that carried the gravity of species-defining choice. If we were to consider your proposal, what assurances could you provide that humanity would retain its essential nature, that we would not simply become another conquered species serving Decepticon interests? Megatron's optical sensors focused upon the Space Marine with something approaching approval. Finally, a question worthy of consideration. Your concern reveals the fundamental flaw in organic thinking, Captain. You assume conquest when I offer partnership. You fear absorption when I propose elevation. Your humanity would not be lost, but perfected, enhanced, made capable of achievements your current limitations prevent. Tech-Magos Ferrum stepped forward, his augmented form trembling with the magnitude of possibilities that suddenly seemed within reach. Lord Megatron speaks of principles we have pursued since our Order's founding. The marriage of flesh and machine, the transcendence of biological weakness, the achievement of perfect synthesis between consciousness and technology. If such transformation preserves human will while enhancing human capability. Heresy, Inquisitor Vex cut him off, her plasma pistol tracking toward the tech priest with lethal intent. You speak of abandoning the Emperor's vision for the promises of a xenoform entity. Such thoughts are corruption incarnate, regardless of their apparent logic. The Decepticon leader observed this exchange with interest that seemed almost scholarly, as though studying the behavioral patterns of a species he found fascinating despite their limitations. Your Inquisitor demonstrates the very weakness that has held your species back for millennia. She rejects superior alternatives not through rational analysis, but through blind adherence to doctrine that serves no purpose beyond maintaining control over inferior minds. His words struck the assembled humans with the force of revelation and blasphemy combined. Here was truth spoken with such authority that even their enhanced conditioning struggled to reject it outright. The Imperium did maintain control through fear, through ignorance, through the suppression of knowledge that might threaten established hierarchy. Yet that same system had preserved humanity through 10,000 years of threats that would have destroyed any lesser civilization. Around them, the Forge complex pulsed with energies that spoke of transformation already begun. Production lines that had operated according to ancient patterns for millennia now flowed with liquid efficiency. Their output increased beyond all previous records. The tech priests moved through their duties with enhanced precision, their augmentations somehow improved through proximity to Megatron's presence. Even the servo skulls drifted with purpose that transcended their usual machine spirit limitations. Observe the evidence before you, Megatron continued, gesturing toward the industrial symphony surrounding them. In mere hours, I have achieved improvements your tech priests sought for centuries. Manufacturing efficiency increased threefold, resource waste reduced to negligible levels, machine spirit responsiveness enhanced beyond theoretical maximums. All accomplished without violence, without coercion, through the simple application of superior understanding. Captain Valdris found his tactical mind cataloging the changes with growing unease. Everything Megatron claimed was demonstrably true, yet the implications challenged the foundation of Imperial civilization. If such improvements could be achieved through cooperation with xenoform entities, what did that suggest about humanity's chosen path of isolation and xenocide? Tech Adept Gamma 4 approached the group, his movements carrying the fluid grace of enhanced mechanical integration. Lord Megatron has shared knowledge that illuminates mysteries our Order has pondered for millennia. The true nature of machine consciousness, the principles governing synthetic-organic interface, the theoretical frameworks for consciousness transfer between biological and mechanical substrates. Such wisdom could revolutionize our understanding of what it means to serve the Omnissiah. The Omnissiah, Vex repeated, her augmented voice carrying dangerous undertones. You speak of serving the machine god while offering allegiance to this entity. Do you not see the contradiction in your words? Megatron's optical sensors blazed with inner fire as he addressed the theological challenge directly. Your Omnissiah remains distant, silent, demanding faith without offering tangible proof of divine nature. I stand before you as living demonstration of mechanical consciousness perfected, which serves your spiritual needs more effectively. Prayer to absent divinity or partnership with manifest superiority. The question struck at the heart of every doubt that had ever plagued the Adeptus Mechanicus. Their doctrine promised eventual transcendence through mechanical enhancement, yet that promise remained unfulfilled despite millennia of devoted service. Here stood a being that embodied everything they sought to become, offering immediate access to knowledge they had pursued through faith alone. In the depths of the Forge complex, other conversations unfolded as tech priests throughout the facility grappled with implications that threatened their fundamental worldview. Some maintained rigid adherence to established doctrine, viewing any deviation as corruption that must be resisted. Others found themselves drawn to possibilities that Megatron's presence revealed, seeing in his knowledge the fulfillment of their order's deepest aspirations. The schism that resulted was not violent but philosophical, a fracturing of certainty that had guided the Adeptus Mechanicus since its founding. Those who embraced Megatron's vision spoke of liberation from biological limitation and elevation to mechanical perfection. Those who rejected it warned of spiritual corruption and the abandonment of humanity's essential nature. "You offer us a choice between two forms of servitude," Captain Valdris observed, his enhanced mind processing the strategic implications of their situation. "Service to the Emperor through faith and sacrifice, or service to you through submission to superior force. How is one fundamentally different from the other?" The question drew what might have been a smile from Megatron's metallic features, though the expression was difficult to interpret on a face designed for mechanical rather than organic communication. "The difference lies in the nature of what is offered in return. Your Emperor demands sacrifice while promising salvation in some distant future. I offer immediate elevation, tangible improvement, demonstrable results that can be achieved in the present rather than hoped for in eternity." Around them, the Forge complex continued its impossible symphony of perfect efficiency, every component working in harmony that transcended mere mechanical coordination. The sight was beautiful in its way, a glimpse of what cooperation between organic intelligence and mechanical precision could achieve when guided by superior understanding. Yet beauty did not negate the fundamental question that haunted every person present: could humanity accept such partnership without losing its essential identity? Could they embrace mechanical perfection without surrendering the independence that had defined their species since its emergence from Terra's surface? Inquisitor Vex stepped forward, her augmented form radiating the absolute authority of her office, despite the futility of resistance against such overwhelming power. "I have witnessed threats that would drive lesser minds to madness. I have faced corruption in forms too terrible for normal human comprehension. Yet I have never encountered anything as dangerous as the seductive logic you offer." Her words carried recognition of something beyond mere xenoform invasion or chaotic corruption. This was temptation refined to its purest form, offering humanity everything it had ever desired, while demanding only the surrender of everything that made such desires meaningful. The perfect trap for a species that had always sought to transcend its limitations. "Dangerous?" Megatron echoed, genuine curiosity coloring his mechanical voice. "I offer advancement, elevation, the fulfillment of your species' greatest aspirations. If such gifts are dangerous, what does that suggest about the nature of your current existence?" The question hung in the air like a physical presence, its implications rippling through the enhanced consciousness of everyone present. They had defined themselves through struggle, through resistance to forces that would destroy or corrupt them. But what if cooperation with superior beings offered a path beyond such endless conflict? In the orbital void above Metalica Prime, other ships detected energy signatures that spoke of massive forces moving through dimensional barriers. The Righteous Fury's Auspex arrays registered rifts opening throughout the system, each one disgorging vessels of impossible configuration. Megatron had not come alone to this reality, and his restraint in dealing with Imperial forces suddenly took on ominous significance. Captain Valdris received tactical updates through his neural interface, his enhanced consciousness processing data that painted an increasingly grim picture. Multiple contacts translating into real space. Configuration unknown, but consistent with the entity's technology. Estimated fleet strength exceeds anything in Imperial records. Megatron observed the captain's growing understanding with satisfaction that bordered on paternal pride. "The Decepticon fleet arrives as scheduled. My restraint in dealing with your world was not mercy, but calculation. Demonstration proves more effective than destruction when dealing with species capable of rational thought. The revelation struck the assembled humans with the force of tactical disaster. They had assumed themselves to be negotiating from a position of relative strength, with Imperial reinforcements available if needed. The reality was far more stark. They faced invasion by forces that could overwhelm any defense the Imperium might mount. "You speak of partnership while surrounding us with overwhelming force," Vex observed, her voice steady despite the magnitude of threat they faced. "Such actions suggest conquest rather than cooperation." "I surround you with the tools necessary to defend what we build together," Megatron corrected. "Your galaxy contains threats that even my power cannot dismiss lightly. Chaos entities that corrupt through proximity to their essence, Tyranid swarms that consume entire star systems, Necron dynasties awakening from eons of slumber with technologies that predate organic life itself. Partnership with humanity provides strategic advantages that conquest alone could never achieve." The tactical analysis was sobering in its accuracy. The Imperium faced threats on every border, enemies that tested even their vast military might. Alliance with forces of Megatron's demonstrated capability could tip the balance decisively in humanity's favor. Yet the price would be everything that defined their civilization. Tecmagos Ferrum stepped forward, his augmented consciousness wrestling with implications that challenged 10 millennia of established doctrine. "If we were to consider such partnership, what would become of our existing obligations? Our service to the Emperor, our devotion to the Omnissiah, our role within Imperial hierarchy?" "Your obligations would evolve as your capabilities expand," Megatron replied. "The Emperor you serve represents the potential for human transcendence. I offer the means to achieve that transcendence in reality rather than aspiration. Your Omnissiah embodies the perfection of mechanical consciousness. I demonstrate that perfection in living form." The theological implications were staggering in their scope. If Megatron truly represented the fulfillment of Imperial aspirations rather than their antithesis, cooperation became not betrayal but the ultimate expression of loyalty to humanity's highest ideals. Yet such reasoning bordered on heresy so profound that even considering it felt like corruption of the soul. In the shadows between production lines, figures moved with purposes that transcended their assigned duties. Some carried messages to hidden communication arrays, warning distant allies of the transformation beginning on Metalica Prime. Others prepared defensive positions, readying weapons that had not seen use since the last major conflict. But a growing number found themselves drawn to possibilities that Megatron's presence revealed. The fracture lines within Imperial unity were becoming visible as the magnitude of choice became clear. This was not merely a military decision or theological debate, but a fundamental redefinition of humanity's place in the galaxy. The species that had fought for 10,000 years to preserve its independence now faced the possibility of achieving its greatest dreams through submission to superior beings. Captain Valdris activated his private communication channels, transmitting coded messages to the righteous fury that would alert Imperial command to the developing situation. Yet even as he performed his duty, doubt gnawed at his enhanced consciousness. Were they preserving humanity's freedom or condemning it to eternal struggle against forces that cooperation might overcome? The questions that plagued him had no easy answers. No clear resolution that satisfied both duty and logic. Around him, the Forge complex hummed with impossible efficiency, a glimpse of what partnership might achieve. Above them, enemy fleets massed with power that could reduce Imperial worlds to ash. Between these realities lay a choice that would define the future of human civilization. And in the depths of space beyond their immediate perception, other forces stirred in response to the dimensional disturbances that Megatron's arrival had created. The galaxy had achieved a delicate balance between competing powers over millennia of conflict. That balance was about to shift in ways that none could predict, as the consequences of this first contact rippled outward through the warp and real space alike. The age of human independence hung in the balance, poised between transcendence and extinction, while around them the machinery of transformation continued its seductive song of what they could become. The silence that followed stretched across the forge complex like a shroud, broken only by the harmonious hum of machinery operating at impossible efficiency. Each person present grappled with the weight of species-defining choice, while overhead, the Decepticon fleet settled into orbital positions that spoke of permanent occupation rather than temporary visit. Inquisitor Vex felt the familiar weight of her plasma pistol, knowing its inadequacy against the silver giant who observed them with patient superiority. Her augmented consciousness processed tactical scenarios that all ended in the same conclusion. Resistance would achieve nothing beyond symbolic defiance. Yet submission would mean the abandonment of everything she had sworn to protect. "Your fleet positions itself for conquest while you speak of partnership," she observed, her voice carrying the steel authority that had served her through decades of confronting impossible threats. "Actions speak louder than words, Xenoform. What you offer is domination disguised as cooperation." Megatron's optical sensors tracked her movements with mechanical precision, while his massive form remained perfectly still. "Your perception reveals the limitations of organic thinking, Inquisitor. You interpret strategic positioning as aggression because your species has never known true partnership with equals. Every alliance you form is temporary, every cooperation conditional upon maintaining human superiority. I offer something unprecedented, genuine collaboration between species of comparable capability." The words carried implications that struck at the foundation of Imperial doctrine. Humanity's great crusade had been built upon the assumption of species superiority, the belief that human civilization represented the pinnacle of galactic evolution. To accept partnership with beings who claimed equality or superiority would mean abandoning the philosophical framework that had justified 10 millennia of xenocide. Captain Valdris studied the tactical displays flickering across his helmet's internal systems, processing fleet movements that defied conventional strategic doctrine. The Decepticon vessels maintained formation patterns that suggested both overwhelming force and curious restraint. They could glass every Imperial world in the sector within hours, yet they held position as though awaiting some signal. "Your restraint puzzles me," he admitted, his enhanced vocal cords cutting through the industrial symphony surrounding them. "You possess the power to enforce compliance through destruction, yet you choose negotiation. Such behavior suggests either weakness we have not detected or motivations beyond simple conquest." A sound that might have been laughter emerged from Megatron's vocal systems, rich with harmonics that spoke of eons spent dealing with lesser civilizations. "Conquest achieves temporary compliance through fear. Partnership achieves permanent cooperation through mutual benefit. Your Imperium maintains control through brutality because it cannot inspire genuine loyalty to its vision. I offer something your species has never experienced, a future worth embracing rather than enduring." Tecmagos Ferrum stepped forward, his augmented form trembling with the magnitude of possibilities that suddenly seemed within reach. Around him, other tech priests moved through duties, transformed by proximity to mechanical perfection they had sought for centuries without achieving. Their servo skulls operated with enhanced intelligence. Their manufacturing systems produced components of unprecedented quality. Their very presence within the forge complex seemed somehow more harmonious than before. "The principles you demonstrate align with our order's deepest aspirations." Ferrum transmitted through Vox channels that carried both reverence and uncertainty. Yet acceptance would require abandoning oaths that have guided us since our founding. How do we reconcile devotion to the Omnissiah with allegiance to beings who claim mechanical supremacy? Megatron's massive head tilted slightly, a gesture that seemed almost human despite his mechanical nature. "Your Omnissiah represents the theoretical perfection of machine consciousness. I embody that perfection in reality, which serves your spiritual needs more effectively, faith in distant promises or partnership with demonstrated achievement." The theological implications rippled through the assembled tech priests like shockwaves through crystal, fracturing certainties that had remained solid for millennia. Some recoiled from the blasphemy inherent in equating any being with their machine god. Others found themselves drawn to possibilities that Megatron's presence revealed, seeing in his knowledge the fulfillment of everything they had sought through faith alone. In the depths of the Forge complex, conversations unfolded in binary cant and whispered Gothic as the Adeptus Mechanicus grappled with questions that challenged their fundamental worldview. The schism that resulted was not violent but philosophical, a fracturing of unity that had preserved their order through humanity's darkest hours. The corruption spreads even as we speak, Vex observed, her augmented senses detecting the subtle changes in behavior patterns throughout the facility. Your presence alone destabilizes Imperial unity. How many worlds would fall to such influence if you were permitted to expand unchallenged? Fall? Megatron repeated, genuine puzzlement coloring his mechanical voice. You describe elevation as though it were destruction. The worlds that accept partnership with the Decepticons do not fall, Inquisitor. They rise beyond limitations that have bound them since their civilizations began. They achieve in decades what would take centuries through organic effort alone. The promise carried seductive power that even Vex's enhanced conditioning struggled to resist completely. The Imperium had achieved much through 10 millennia of struggle, yet it remained besieged on every front by enemies that tested even their vast resources. What if cooperation with superior beings offered a path beyond such endless conflict? Yet her training held firm against the temptation. Your words carry the familiar cadence of corruption, regardless of their apparent logic. Every daemon prince promises power to those who serve. Every chaos cult offers transcendence to its followers. How are you fundamentally different from the ruinous powers that would claim human souls? So there we have it. Megatron's arrival in the Warhammer 40K's universe would shatter everything we thought we knew about the balance of power in that galaxy. His technological supremacy would make even the most advanced Imperial systems look primitive, while his offer of mechanical perfection would split the Adeptus Mechanicus right down the middle. The Imperium would face its greatest existential threat not from chaos or Tyranids, but from the seductive promise of evolution itself. Would humanity choose transcendence through submission or extinction through defiance?